It was November 24, 1784, in a small cabin near Barboursville, Virginia, when Zachary Taylor came into the world, a child destined not for words or politics, but for war. He was born into a nation still finding its identity, and his own family was part of that journey. His father, Richard Taylor, was a Revolutionary War veteran and a close friend of George Washington. Little did anyone know, this newborn would one day rise to command armies and sit in the very chair of the presidency. When Zachary was still a boy, his family moved west to the untamed lands of Kentucky. There, among rough terrain and frontier dangers, his character hardened. He learned to ride before he could read well, and his world was filled with the sound of hammers, horses, and the endless call of the wilderness. This early life shaped him into a man of action, silent, practical, and fiercely independent. He had little formal education, but his mind was sharp and his will unbreakable. When he joined the U.S. Army in 1808, the young man found his true calling. As a junior officer, he wasn't polished or political. He was rugged, loyal, and relentless. The army was his home, and the battlefield his proving ground. He rose through the ranks slowly, fighting in conflicts that tested America's young military. His first major trial came during the War of 1812, when he defended Fort Harrison against Native American attacks, outnumbered and facing starvation. He refused to surrender, a stand that earned him the nickname Old Rough and Ready. That moment defined him. He didn't crave power. He earned it through survival. By the time most men of his era settled into farm life, Taylor was already a legend among soldiers. His courage wasn't showy. It was steady, like the man himself. Whether in the wild forests of Indiana or the swamps of Florida, Zachary Taylor's resolve never broke. He wasn't born to be a politician, he was born to lead men through fire and chaos. And though he didn't yet know it, that same spirit would one day carry him all the way to the White House. When the War of 1812 ended, Taylor could have left the military behind. He could have gone home to a quiet life on his plantation, raising crops and children in peace. But that wasn't who he was. Conflict had become part of his identity, not out of love for war, but a sense of duty to the land he had sworn to protect. The next few decades would see him posted across America's frontier. From the sweltering heat of Louisiana to the wild stretches of the Mississippi, Taylor commanded troops, built forts, and kept fragile order. He married Margaret Smith, a gentlewoman from Maryland, in 1810, and together they built a family, even as the army kept them constantly on the move. Their life was far from comfortable, but Taylor's commitment never wavered. His sense of honor was old-fashioned, even for his time. He believed in fairness, hard work, and discipline. Soldiers respected him because he shared their hardships. He slept in the dirt, ate the same food, and never asked of them what he wouldn't do himself. That earned him their loyalty and the admiration of the nation. In the 1830s, during the Second Seminole War in Florida, Taylor once again found himself in the thick of battle. The enemy used guerrilla tactics, striking from swamps and forests, but Taylor's endurance carried him through. His victory at the Battle of Lake Okeechobee was hard-won, a brutal, muddy fight that tested his leadership. He never studied strategy, he lived it. By the 1840s, Zachary Taylor had become a seasoned general with decades of service. Yet he remained humble, uninterested in glory or politics. The people, however, had begun to notice him. America was growing, and with that growth came new challenges, especially in its ambitions to expand westward. Soon, Taylor's courage would be tested on a scale that would make him not just a national hero, but a household name. The winds of destiny were shifting once again, pushing him toward the most famous war of his career, and the doorway to unexpected power. By 1846, America was expanding aggressively toward the Pacific, and tensions with Mexico were reaching a boiling point. The spark ignited on the Rio Grande, and President James K. Polk sent General Zachary Taylor, Old Rough and Ready, to defend the border. Taylor, now in his 60s, was a veteran of decades of war. He was practical and tough, and his troops adored him. When the Mexican-American War began, Taylor's calm leadership transformed chaos into triumph. At Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma, His outnumbered forces crushed the enemy with precision and grit. The nation took notice. Newspapers across the U.S. celebrated his victories, the simple soldier who humbled mighty armies. Then came the Battle of Buena Vista, one of the most defining moments of his life. Facing a Mexican army 3 times his size, Taylor held firm. Cannons roared, dust filled the air, and confusion reigned, yet Taylor stood unmoved, issuing commands with his trademark steadiness. Against all odds, the American forces won. In the smoke of war, a president was born. The victory made him a national icon overnight. He became a symbol of courage and unity in a country increasingly divided over slavery and politics. He didn't boast or seek fame, but fame found him anyway. Americans, weary of politicians' empty promises, saw in Taylor a man of integrity, honest, strong, and untouched by Washington corruption. Even as he returned home, Taylor's popularity soared. Portraits of him filled newspapers, songs were written in his honor, and people began whispering about his potential for higher office. He had never voted in his life, never held political ambition. But destiny was quietly arranging the next chapter of his story. The same man who had commanded armies was now being called to lead a divided nation, not by choice, but by the will of the people. As the war ended, Zachary Taylor returned not to the quiet of retirement, but to a whirlwind of public attention. He had no political background, no experience in government, yet the people demanded him. They saw him as the ideal leader, independent, incorruptible, and proven under pressure. The Whig Party saw their chance. They needed a national hero to win the presidency in 1848, and Taylor fit perfectly. Though he was politically inexperienced, his fame could carry them to victory. He reluctantly accepted the nomination, promising to serve the people, not the party. His campaign was unlike any before. Taylor didn't give speeches or attend rallies. His reputation spoke for him. Posters depicted him as old, rough, and ready, the soldier who fought for every inch of American soil. Across cities and farms, voters rallied around his name. In November 1848, Zachary Taylor, the man who had never before voted, was elected the 12th President of the United States. A soldier without politics had become a president without a plan. When he entered the White House in March 1849, the country stood on the edge of a moral and political divide. The issue of slavery in newly acquired territories was tearing the nation apart. Taylor, a slave owner himself, faced an impossible test: how to keep the Union from breaking apart. He believed in the Constitution above all. He opposed secession, and warned that anyone who tried to divide the nation would face his resistance, even if it meant using force. For a man who despised politics, he was now standing in the middle of its deadliest storm. His presidency had barely begun, but already the battles ahead would prove more dangerous than any he'd faced on the field. The United States in 1849 was bursting with tension. California had discovered gold, the frontier was booming, and slavery debates filled every hall of Congress. Taylor, though new to politics, understood one truth: the Union must survive. He believed the newly acquired territories from Mexico should decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. Without Congress forcing the issue, but both northern abolitionists and southern slaveholders opposed him. To the north, he was a slave owner. To the south, a traitor to their cause. Still, Taylor stood firm. He urged unity and warned secessionists that he would personally lead the army against any state that defied the Union. It was a bold stance, one that shocked both his allies and enemies. His simple, soldier-like approach to government clashed with Washington's tangled web of politics. He wasn't playing politics, he was fighting for survival again. Behind the scenes, Taylor worked tirelessly to calm tensions. He supported California's bid to enter the Union as a free state, knowing it would anger the South. His decisions were based on principle, not popularity. Yet his straightforward leadership style earned him quiet respect from citizens who longed for honesty in government. But Washington was a battlefield of words, not bullets, and Taylor's blunt methods won him more enemies than friends. The pressures of the presidency were immense. He was aging, tired, and carrying the weight of a country cracking at its seams. Still, He pressed on, determined to protect the nation he had bled for on the battlefield. But fate, as it had so often done in his life, was about to strike without warning, and this time, not even old Rough and Ready could fight back. The summer of 1850 brought sweltering heat to Washington, D.C. On July 4th, President Zachary Taylor attended a ceremony at the Washington Monument, standing for hours under the blazing sun. He returned to the White House exhausted and dehydrated, yet in good spirits. Later that evening, he ate a simple meal, raw fruit, iced milk, and cherries, a choice that would change history. Within hours, Taylor fell violently ill. His stomach cramped, fever rose, and his condition worsened rapidly. Doctors, lacking modern knowledge, treated him with methods that only made things worse: bleeding, blistering, and harsh medicines. For days, the White House was filled with fear. The strong general who had faced cannon fire now fought for his life. His family and cabinet watched helplessly as he weakened, whispering prayers through sleepless nights. After a lifetime of war, his final enemy was invisible. By July 9, 1850, Zachary Taylor, the man who had never surrendered in battle, lost his fight with disease. He died after just 16 months in office. The nation was stunned. Crowds filled the streets in mourning. Newspapers declared that old Rough and Ready had fallen, not to an army, but to fate itself. His death left the country without a steady hand at a moment of deep crisis. Vice President Millard Fillmore took office and soon signed the Compromise of 1850, a series of laws Taylor had opposed. Some believed his untimely death changed the entire direction of American history. Though his presidency was short, Taylor's courage, integrity, and independence had left a mark that could not be erased. The man who never sought power had once again proven that true leadership isn't about ambition, it's about duty. After his death, Zachary Taylor was laid to rest on his family's estate in Louisville, Kentucky. Soldiers who had served under him traveled long distances to pay their respects. He was buried with full military honors, fitting for a man who had lived his entire life in service to the country. Though his presidency was brief, his reputation as a soldier and patriot endured. He had fought in nearly every major American war from 1812 to Mexico, and his record of bravery was unmatched. To the people, he remained the same humble general, old Rough and Ready, a man who valued action over words. In the years after his death, historians debated what might have been if he had lived longer. Would he have stopped the drift towards civil war? Would his strength have kept the Union united? Those questions lingered, unanswered but powerful. His silence became his legacy, his actions, his voice. Taylor's simple approach to leadership, honesty, courage, and fairness inspired generations of Americans. His story reminded people that greatness doesn't require polish or politics, only conviction. His daughter, Sarah Knox Taylor, had once married Jefferson Davis, who would later become the President of the Confederacy. That strange twist of fate connected Taylor's name to both sides of the Civil War, a haunting symbol of how divided the nation would soon become. But above all, Taylor's life embodied the American ideal of perseverance. From the frontier cabins of Kentucky to the fields of Mexico, he never stopped fighting for what he believed in: the preservation of the United States. Time has softened the memory of Zachary Taylor, but not his significance. He may not have crafted great speeches or complex policies, but his life told a different story. One of integrity, grit, and quiet strength. In an age when politics often felt like theater, Taylor was refreshingly real. He lived simply, spoke plainly, and led fearlessly. His short presidency left unfinished business, but his example outlasted the years he spent in office. Today, his tomb in Louisville stands as a reminder of the soldier who became president not by ambition, but by character. His nickname, Old, Rough and Ready, was more than a phrase. It captured his essence, rough in manner, ready for any challenge. He didn't seek history's spotlight, it found him in battle. Zachary Taylor's story is that of a man who embodied the American frontier spirit. He rose from humble beginnings to command armies, and from commanding armies to leading a nation. His courage bridged the gap between the wilderness and the White House. Even in death, His influence lingered in the soldiers who followed his example, in the presidents who admired his resolve, and in the people who cherished his authenticity. He may have served the shortest term of any elected president up to his time, but his life stretched far beyond those months. It was a life defined not by length, but by purpose. In every sense, Zachary Taylor proved that true leadership doesn't come from ambition, it comes from the heart. Old, rough and ready, a name America would never forget.